welcome to The Debate. Today we're focusing on a really dramatic policy pivot happening in Toronto, specifically around missing middle housing. We're talking about the recent approval of 6-unit low-rise multiplexes, the so-called sixplexes, in residential neighborhoods. Council has made the change, they've removed some big financial barriers, and, they've set a framework for density.
Right. And that brings us to our central question. Does this alignment of, new zoning, these huge financial incentives like waived development charges, and the rise of these end-to-end professional partners, does it all truly make the sixplex a clear, secure, and immediate investment? Or do the regulatory complexities and, frankly, the policy instability still pose too great a risk for a new investor?
And I'll be arguing that this convergence of incentives and expertise really does present a unique, time-sensitive opportunity, and that partnering with an integrated team is basically the necessary path for new investors to successfully navigate this market.
And I'm going to argue that while the vision is compelling, the immediate reality is just defined by significant procedural friction, political uncertainty, and some very high barriers to entry, especially around financing. That green light everyone talks about, it feels very conditional to me.
Well, I can see why you'd emphasize caution, but let's focus on just how seismic this shift has been. The city has, for all intents and purposes, mandated missing middle housing. It's driven by the housing crisis, sure, but also by the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund, the HAF. And for investors, this creates a critical window right now, an early mover advantage. You can secure properties based on their single-family valuation before the full sixplex potential is completely priced into the land value. And crucially, the financial model is now viable. We're talking about development charges, DCs, those huge municipal fees, being completely waived for all 6 units. This policy, which was just confirmed in July of 2025, it removes a cost barrier that just killed the economics of these projects before.
Okay.
And on top of that, projects with 5 or more units now qualify for CMHC MLI Select financing. This is, it's revolutionary. You get loan-to-cost ratios up to 95% and amortization periods of up to 50 years. So this isn't your standard commercial mortgage, it's government-backed, long-term financing. Now, I'll grant you, the whole process is daunting, but an integrated end-to-end partner makes it achievable. They can deliver a stable, cash-flowing asset right to your portfolio.
That is a very compelling sketch of the potential. I'll give you that. But I find myself really focusing on the fine print. I come at it from a very different perspective on timeline and certainty. So while the financial levers are powerful, the regulatory environment is, it's anything but stable. First off, this permission isn't citywide. It's limited to specific wards, and the new bylaw itself is still vulnerable. As of now, mid-2025, we are still in the appeal window for the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OLT.
Right.
If opposition groups appeal, and they are very organized, this whole policy could be tied up in litigation for months, maybe years. That stalls every single project. And even if we assume there's no appeal, the timeline it's long. In a best case, as of right scenario, no variances, you're still looking at 1.5 to 2 years from closing to occupancy. And that's before we even talk about the unaddressed technical risks, like the city exempting these multiplexes from providing functional servicing reports.
Let's actually dig into that financial contention right away, because the leverage is the real game changer here. It mitigates a lot of that risk by reducing the cash you need up front. We're seeing these projects structured to yield, 12 to 14% returns on equity before you even factor in appreciation. And that is directly because of the MLI Select program. Standard commercial financing might get you 70% loan-to-value over 25 years. MLI Select gets you up to 95% over 50 years.
Okay, but the path to getting that financing is anything but straightforward. I'm sorry, I just don't buy it for a new investor. The MLI Select program, it's financially seductive, yes, but it is tied to a mandatory process that is genuinely foreign to anyone who hasn't done commercial development. Specifically, CMHC demands mandatory contract surety bonding, a performance bond, and a labor and material payment bond, each covering 50% of the contract's value.
And that's a fair point, but
And let's be really clear what that means. These aren't just insurance policies. To qualify for these bonds, the developer has to show deep financial strength. We're talking audited financials, a proven track record, things that typical individual investor trying to build one sixplex just doesn't have. Getting this bonding can stall a project for months, which completely undermines this idea of fast-track approvals. It's a high gate, and it locks out the very people the program is supposed to help.
But that is precisely why the model of the integrated partner is so essential. You're right. An individual trying to secure those bonds alone would face a prohibitive barrier. But when you partner with a team that already has the track record, the audited financials, and the strength to meet those CMHC bonding requirements on behalf of the project, well, the investor's own track record becomes moot. They absorb that complexity, they package the whole thing into an investable CMHC-compliant vehicle. They find the property, analyze it, manage the design within that critical 10.5-meter height limit, get the permits, oversee construction, everything, right through to the final MLI Select refinance. It transforms it from a high-risk development project into an asset acquisition.
I appreciate that the partner mitigates that friction, but the roadmap they're relying on is only as stable as City Council, which has, well, it's shown an inability to hold a consistent line. The policy was supposed to be citywide, that was part of the half agreement, but political pressure watered it down to just 9 wards. That kind of instability is a huge red flag, and we can't ignore the community opposition. It is fierce.
Right.
Residents are concerned about everything from neighborhood fabric to parking. And we're already seeing people gaming the system, developers seeking variances for multiplexes only to build huge single-family homes instead. It shows the city's enforcement is weak.
I'd actually frame that political volatility as another reason why the structured, integrated approach is so necessary. Their entire business model is based on avoiding the politically fraught process of seeking a minor variance. They prioritize designing strictly within the as-of-right limits. They work meticulously within that 10.5-meter height allowance.
And by the way, that height limit is key. It allows for 4 stories or 3+ a basement with great ceiling heights, which makes that basement unit a really desirable living space. By sticking to the letter of the law, they create a predictable roadmap and they mitigate the risk of community opposition, because legally, there's no standing if the design is 100% compliant.
Okay, let's turn to the final point then, which is viability for actual housing supply versus these technical roadblocks. We agree sixplexes are essential gentle density, but let's face the physical constraints. City staff modeling found that fitting 6 units onto a typical narrow Toronto lot often means you get smaller units, studios, 1-bedrooms. The promise of abundant family-sized housing, it might be limited.
Well, it's better than nothing.
Of course. But more concerning to me is the hidden infrastructure time bomb. As I said, the city doesn't require functional servicing reports for these projects. An FSR is what checks if the old sewer systems can handle the density. The cumulative effect of dozens of these in one area could dramatically increase the risk of basement flooding, a huge liability in Toronto. The city is basically transferring that risk onto the property owner. It's a major unknown cost risk.
I do acknowledge that deferred infrastructure risk is real, but the alternative is just compounding the housing crisis. And that technical roadblock you're raising, it actually reinforces my central argument. The absolute need for an expert partner. A sophisticated team knows the risk profile of these neighborhoods. They aren't going to rely on the city waiving a report. Their success depends on delivering a stable, dry asset. They'll do their own due diligence, transforming that unknown liability into a manageable risk.
A risk that only a few teams can actually manage.
Exactly. The regulatory environment and the financial incentives are perfectly aligned right now to reward decisive, early action in these 9 wards. Partnering with a team that manages the technical and bureaucratic burden makes this a financially superior way to build long-term wealth. The early mover captures the land value before that sixplex potential is fully priced in.
The opportunity is real, I'll grant you that, but the complexity dictates extreme caution. The decision has to be made with eyes wide open to the high administrative capital needed for that mandatory bonding process. That, plus the unstable political landscape and the potential for these unmanaged infrastructure challenges, means the market is still very high friction. The promise of immediate returns has to be balanced against the significant risk of getting bogged down.
So, this debate has really sharpened our understanding of a high-stakes opportunity. We've established the hurdles are significant, but the financial upside, amplified by those DC waivers and the MLI Select terms, is incredibly compelling. The tension is between acting now or waiting for certainty, and it's clear that navigating this complexity requires professional guidance.
Indeed, navigating the acquisition, the CMHC underwriting, the meticulous design, a 2-year construction timeline, all while mitigating infrastructure risk. It is a very, very heavy lift.
So for those listening who are ready to explore the feasibility of entering the Toronto 6-plex market and who require that end-to-end professional solution, a helping hand from finding candidates and analyzing the investment, all the way to construction and refinancing using those critical CMHC programs, we highly suggest reaching out to an experienced, integrated team. You can call Ali and his team at ABRE Team with eXp Realty Brokerage in the Toronto area to take the next step.